continue reading. You want to put up the next quote, Chaitanya Dasi? You can follow this in the chat if you read English. Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvise Sasanyavadi Paschachata Satarine. So, this is from the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, chapter 31. It is very difficult for me to express anything beyond this, Ramananda Roy replied. I can only say that there is an emotional activity called Prema Vilas Vivarta, which I may try to explain, but I do not know whether you will be happy to hear it. In Prema Vilas, there are two kinds of emotional activity, separation and meeting. That transcendental separation is so acute, and it is actually more ecstatic than meeting. Ramananda Roy was expert in understanding these highly elevated dealings between Radha and Krishna, and he composed a nice song, which he narrated to the Lord. The purport of the song is that the lover and the beloved before meeting generate a kind of emotion by the exchange of their transcendental activities. That emotion is raga or attraction. Srimati Radharani expressed her willingness that this attraction and affection between us rise to the highest extent, but the cause of this attraction is Radharani herself. Whatever the cause may be, Radharani said, that affection between you and me has mixed us in oneness. Now that it is the time of separation, I cannot see the history of the evolution of this love. There was no cause or mediator in our love, save our meeting itself and the visionary exchange of feelings. So, if you didn't understand much of that or any of that, it's okay. You don't have to feel unhappy or give up or anything like that. What I would like you to contemplate right now is that there's an exchange. We're hearing about an exchange of meeting and separation and the feelings of Radharani. And of course, these things are pretty much beyond us. But one thing we can understand, let me just clean the lens. One thing we can understand is that the love of this world, and we should always remember this, the love of this world is a perverted reflection of that love. So nothing can compare with that love. And then when we see Radha and Krishna, we understand this is real love. Anything we try in the name of love that isn't in bhakti is a reflection. And in that reflection, there is going to be pain, and there's not going to be the ecstasy that we can get by loving Krishna. So we're trying to understand this, although we can understand with our head. We're trying to understand that this is anything else that we call love. It's tinged with lust. It's tinged with some personal motivation. And so this is the emblem of pure love. And this is how we understand what is pure love. We study the exchange between Radha and Krishna. And then as we're studying that, we remind ourselves, I am studying pure loving relationships. This is the emblem. And I'm trying to understand it. I'm trying to develop it. I'm trying to focus and support this love and relish this love rather than trying to support and relish myself imitating that love. And that if I can support that love, then I can actually experience love and happiness genuinely. And if I try to imitate that love, I will suffer, and that will pull me away from Krishna. So, this is, of course, something you can only understand as you become purified. Because understanding with your head, especially this, is completely theoretical. It's only an idea, it's just giving an idea that there's some form of love. But the only way we can understand love is by having it, by at least trying to serve Krishna lovingly. Then we can understand something about love, something about sacrifice, something about ecstasy, because there'll be some expression of that, some drop of that will enter our heart, which will give us the ability to understand that here, even though I've got a drop of it, I can see this drop is infinitely greater than the ocean of material happiness. And so really, what I would suggest is that you try to get a drop. If you just get a drop, that's plenty. Because that one drop will reveal to you that this one drop is deeper and more valuable than anything material. That Prabhupada would say, and we could understand, whatever emotions we are exhibiting in this world are reflections of pure emotion. And emotion is not bad, but emotion is meant to be engaged in serving Krishna. And we have heard that love of Krishna exists within us. And so that means whatever we're hankering for, it's ultimately just a perversion of the hankering to love Krishna. That's all it is. Anything that's giving us pleasure is a perversion of the pleasure Krishna gives us. It's just that we don't know that pleasure. We're not connected with it. And so therefore we have to look for pleasure somewhere else. But this is why it's so important in Krishna consciousness to be able to access transcendental pleasure on a daily basis. Because then, otherwise, if we don't, it almost becomes like a fairy tale, like it's not real because we don't have experience. And you don't want to see Krishna consciousness as a fairy tale, licking the jar, the outside of the honey, because you can only do that for so long. Because renunciation is founded in attraction. And so how long can you remain renounced without attraction? You can do it for a while, but unless you're getting at least a drop of that nectar of what is this love of Radha and Krishna, you won't be able to maintain your Krishna consciousness. And you won't really know what you're doing in Krishna consciousness. One of our god sisters, Rukmini Devi, she once said something. She really beautiful meditation. She said, in the center of the universe, there is a love affair between Radha and Krishna. That is the center of the universe. And so spiritual life means to focus on that love affair, which is central to all love affairs. That's what spiritual life means. Hare Krishna. Okay, we'll read the next one. Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. It's going to be pretty esoteric, but we're going to listen anyway. From Nectar Devotion. Okay. When a devotee meets Krishna after long separation, the meeting is one of satisfaction. Nectar Devotion 39. When a devotee meets Krishna after long separation, the meeting is one of satisfaction. In the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th chapter, verse 10, it is stated that when Lord Krishna returned to his capital, Dwarka, the inhabitants said, "Dear Lord, if you remain in foreign countries for so long, we shall certainly be bereft of seeing your smiling face. Upon observing your face, we, your eternal servitors, become greatly satisfied. All the anxieties of our existence are immediately mitigated. We cannot see you because you are long absent from Dwarka, and it will be impossible for us to live anymore. This is an instance of satisfaction in meeting Krishna after long separation. Now you might say, but isn't a devotee always satisfied, even in separation? Or aren't they even more satisfied, even in separation? Well, the answer to that question is definitely yes and definitely no. Because, as you know, and you must have heard many times, the spiritual world, in the spiritual world, there is variety. And so variety in this context means separation, right? So do you think there's meeting and separation, that's variety, right? But the mind may think, well, in the spiritual world, everything is just blissful. And so these are different emotions, meeting and separation. So they're saying, we won't be satisfied unless we can see you, because if they're separated, they'll always be hankering to see. And in that sense, not satisfied, but it doesn't mean they're not materially satisfied. Because you could think they're saying that, but they're not. So in spirit, in the transcendental realm, there are varieties, and there must be varieties to increase rasa, to increase the relationship, to increase the exchange. If there were no varieties, I don't know if any of us would want to go there, right? You get to Braj, and it's just like everybody's got one emotion. They're just blissful, and that's it. It's not like that. So there's all emotions, anger, envy, jealousy, fear, all these things, but they're not material. And by that, these material emotions take you away from Krishna. The spiritual emotions, even though we'll call it fear or lust or greed or anger, we'll call it those things, but they're completely transcendental, and they bring you closer to Krishna. So when the gopis say, if they say we'll be satisfied when we see you, that means they're not satisfied. But what does that mean? It means they're hankering to see Krishna, right? So that's a spiritual emotion. If I say I'm not satisfied, it's because I don't have enough money or don't have enough this or that. The problem is that without cultivating spiritual emotions, then all we have left are material emotions. Without cultivating hankering or feelings of separation or dissatisfaction that I'm not completely Krishna conscious, that all those emotions will all be engaged with material things. I'm not satisfied because I don't have enough prestige or enough Facebook followers or enough money or whatever. But when those emotions are employed in Krishna consciousness well and deeply enough, then those emotions will never manifest materially. Material envy, jealousy, all these things, they won't be there. It's not possible. It's not possible when one is transcendentally situated to have those material emotions. So when we find ourselves with these material emotions, we should just take a little pause and think, oh, I'm really not very Krishna conscious. Otherwise, why am I so envious of this devotee or this person? Or why is it that I'm so resentful? Or why am I so angry? Or why am I so lustful? Or why am I so greedy? That can only exist to the degree that we lack Krishna consciousness. Okay, so let's imagine Krishna is now sitting with you in the room, and you're like blissed out, ecstatic, right? What are you thinking about? That you don't have enough Facebook followers? No, you're not going to be thinking that. I think that's obvious, right? You're not going to be thinking, I don't have enough of this or that. And you know the story of Dhruva Maharaj. And Dhruva Maharaj, when he saw Krishna, and Krishna offered him, look at whatever you want, I'll give you. I know you want a planet, I'll give it to you. And then Dhruva said, he said, I don't want anything. And he explained why. He said, because you're everything and I'm seeing you. So how could I want anything? It's like Prabhupada said, if you have $1 million and all your $10 bills and $50 bills and $100 bills are like, you don't have to worry about them because you have $1 million. So when you're full in Krishna consciousness, all the other stuff is like, it's taken care of. So anyway, it's nice to reflect that if I'm being somewhat bewildered, bedazzled, overcome by material emotions, it's a sign that I need to do better in my Krishna consciousness, and I need to find an outlet for my emotions in devotional service. Because our philosophy is, and you all have practical experience, anything not used in Krishna service, if it is your nature, it will get used in Maya service, right? If you're a scholar, let's say you're scholarly, you love to read and study. And if you don't do that in Krishna service, you'll just study world history or science or sociology, geography, psychology, medicine. You'll study something because you just like to study, right? If you like to dance, you'll dance. You'll dance like Michael Jackson, who knows? It's just, you can't avoid your nature. So I've often said, and I will say the rest of my life, that if that nature is not going to be engaged in Krishna service, watch out, because it's going to be engaged in somebody's service, because it's your nature that you will have to act that way. Just like Krishna told Arjuna, you want to be a Brahmin, but you're a Kshatriya. No matter where you go, what you do, you will act as a Kshatriya. So wherever Arjuna would go, if anyone was being harmed, naturally he would protect them because he's a Kshatriya, even if he was dressed as a Brahmin and trying to do a Brahmin's job. Yeah. So if we cultivate emotion, feelings for the devotees, feelings for Prabhupada, for our spiritual master, for the deities, for our service, feelings for Prabhupada's books, feelings for Prabhupada's Leela, this is why Prabhupada, he once said plays are better than books, because all the emotion comes out in the drama. So when you read, you may not experience the emotion unless you're reading from a particular angle, where you're trying to feel what's going on. But often reading is more of an intellectual exercise. It's more of an analytical. But in the drama, you feel the emotion. So when somebody's angry or somebody's feeling separation, you also feel it, and that's good. And so if there's a song about Krishna, we feel the emotion. This is all perfect. Otherwise, we're going to feel it. Baby, I love you. Oh, that's my favorite song. I love you. Isn't it? How many favorite songs do you have, right? And you feel something, but that is supposed to be for Krishna. Okay, next quote. It's from the Krishna book. 82. This is chapter 82. Meeting after long separation, they were all jubilant. Their hearts throbbed and their faces appeared like freshly blossomed lotus flowers. I was just thinking, if you watch Prabhupada's memories, you can see lots of emotion. Laughing, crying. Have you noticed that when the devotees are telling their stories? That's the perfection of emotion. That deep love, deep a deep attachment, deep appreciation for Srila Prabhupada. It's just when they start talking, it comes out, and that's beautiful. And Krishna, Krishna would dress up, and everyone would appreciate how he would dress up. They go to a party, and Krishna would show up, decked out, as they say in England, dressed to the nines, and everyone would appreciate. And look how Krishna's dressed. So you see the deity and you appreciate it. Oh, look how beautiful Krishna's dressed. Otherwise, you're going to appreciate some modeling some latest fashion, right? So we'll continue reading. The inhabitants of Vrindavan were well-wishers and intimate friends of the Yadu dynasty. The meeting of the two parties after long separation was a very touching incident. All the Yadus and the residents of Vrindavan felt such great pleasure in meeting and talking together that it was a unique scene. Meeting after long separation, they were all jubilant. Their hearts throbbed and their faces appeared like freshly bloomed lotus flowers. Drops of tears fell from their eyes. The hair on their bodies stood on end. And because of their extreme ecstasy, they were temporarily speechless. In other words, they dove into the ocean of happiness. I think that just underscores what I just said. So now, when you read these stories, try to feel them, not just understand them, but feel what they were. So if you read this from the point of view of feeling, then when we say all the Yadus and residents of Vrindavan felt great pleasure in meeting and talking together, that it was a unique scene. Now you're trying to feel it rather than analyze it. How are they feeling pleasure? What was the scene like? That's what the intellect does. Generally, that's where we go when we read. But if you try to feel it, then you're going to read it without trying to analyze what were they feeling? What was this pleasure? What must it have been like? And it says after long separation, they finally met. So you kind of feel, you know what it's like to meet someone after long separation. So you read that and you kind of enter into this feeling. What are they feeling? What are they experiencing? That's what we're meant to do. They were crying. Why were they crying? What were they feeling? And they were so ecstatic, they couldn't speak. Like, what is that all about? What's that like? Hare Krishna. Okay, next one. It's from a lecture, London, September 4th, 1973. The real perfection of life is whether by your actions Krishna is satisfied. That is perfection. You don't consider of your personal victory, defeat, loss or gain or distress or happiness. Therefore, Bhaktivinoda Thakur has sung that quote, when I work very difficult task for Krishna, that difficult task becomes very happiness for me. That difficult task becomes very happiness for me. That is the standard of happiness. In the material world, there is duality. In the absolute world, there is simply happiness. There is nothing else. Just like when Krishna is going to Mathura, all the gopis become very distressed, crying. But we cannot understand that what is the happiness of that distress, that we cannot understand from this material. That we cannot understand from this material point of view. That is greatest happiness. When the gopis were crying in separation from Krishna, that is great happiness. Greater happiness than meeting Krishna, That is the philosophy. That is now beginning. Okay, there you go. You got it. You don't have to believe me anymore. You got it straight from Srila Prabhupada. That pain the gopis are feeling when Krishna is leaving for Mathura. The pain we see them falling on the chariot, crying, tearing their hair out, etc. Prabhupada is saying it's a greater happiness. Hare Krishna. So, so Prabhupada here is quoting Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and basically Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying, but something is difficult in the service of Krishna that gives me the greatest pleasure. You may remember I told a story. And one devotee was organizing a preaching program, and it was quite burdensome, complicated. It was a lot of anxiety to manage it. It was probably only managing 20 devotees. And he said, Prabhupada, I don't know how you do it, because this anxiety that I'm going through is very intense. And there's only 20 devotees I'm managing. You're managing this whole international movement. It must be such intense and deep anxiety. Prabhupada, and I think he said something like, you're dealing with so many problems. And Prabhupada said, I don't see any problem. I just see Krishna's service. Although Prabhupada did one time joke when they were, I think it was in Mumbai, when they were trying to get Juhu. He said, we have come to Krishna consciousness for eternal bliss, but now we're getting eternal headache. Because that Juhu project was one headache after another, big headache. So, but philosophically speaking, if we go back to the idea that the spiritual world, there is no distress, it's all blissful, then the so-called distress of the anxiety, it's also blissful. And Prabhupada has said something which we all know, but it's important to remember. He said, there will be anxiety. There will always be anxiety, even in Krishna consciousness. It's just the goal of the object of the anxiety is different. Like, have you ever been in anxiety about your sense gratification? Will I get this job? Do I have to pay this bill? I hope the police don't stop me. So what's the anxiety about? It's all about me, right? So then you come to Krishna consciousness and you think, okay, no more anxiety. Then after a while, you realize that it's difficult work trying to convince people to become devotees. And difficult work trying to convince myself to become a devotee. So then you, in trying to spread Krishna consciousness, do something wonderful, you may have to undergo difficulty, tribulation, anxiety, etc. But then you remind yourself that if you're thinking, oh, I thought I'd come to Krishna consciousness, there'd be no anxiety. And then you remind yourself, but if I were not a devotee, I would just be in anxiety about my sense gratification. So this anxiety for Krishna is actually blissful. And when Prabhupada used the word anxiety, he was using it from the perspective, it was often, not always, but often using it from the perspective of being anxious. Like we said, like Prabhupada said, there must be anxiety. In other words, you must be anxious to serve Krishna. And if you're anxious to serve Krishna, you are in anxiety. That's what it means. And I told this funny story before, I'll tell it again, for those who didn't hear it, and for those who would like to hear it again, and for those who forgot it. So you will fall in one of those three categories, I hope. And if you don't want to hear it, you can go get something to eat, come back in a few minutes. And this story is interesting because Prabhupada contradicts himself, and sometimes we find Prabhupada contradicts himself based on context and situation. So, it's just something to understand about Prabhupada. He could change his view on something based on the situation. Devotees found that were looking for a new building, and they found a new building. It was quite expensive, and a very nice building, very good location. And so they described it to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada, he hadn't yet seen it. They described, it's this big, this many rooms, and we can use this room for this and that room for that. And they'd gone through the whole building and they figured out how, like, here's where the men will live, here's where the women, here's the deities will be, here's the kitchen, here's the deity backup room, here's the office. They had it all figured out. Here's the prasadam room. And then Prabhupada asked, how much does it cost? And it was, at that time, it was quite high. By today's standards, no, but by standards in the mid-70s, it was quite expensive. And Prabhupada just said, forget it. We don't want to buy anxiety. Meaning, all we'll be we'll just like be totally consumed by raising money to pay the mortgage. Like that. We don't want to buy anxiety. If you buy the building, you buy anxiety. And so the temple president just said, okay, Srila Prabhupada. So as I said, this conversation had taken place on the phone. So Prabhupada had never seen the building. But 6 months later, he came to the city. It was in Toronto, Canada. And he asked about the temple. So the temple president forgot about it because Prabhupada said, we don't want to buy anxiety. So when Prabhupada asked about the temple president said, would you like to see it? And Prabhupada said, yes. So they took him and they did the same thing here. This will be the temple room. The deities will go there. This will be the prasadam hall. This will be the offices. This is the brahmacharis, the brahmacharinis, like that. Then Prabhupada said, so you're going to get it? And the temple president said, no, Prabhupada, we don't want to buy anxiety. I'm just repeating what Prabhupada told him. And Prabhupada slammed his fist on the desk. There must be anxiety, otherwise we just eat and sleep. So Prabhupada was in a different mood then, sensing like my disciples, like they need to stretch themselves. This is good. So that's a story about favorable anxiety, basically. How if you're a little bit in anxiety over service, or you're worried about your own Krishna consciousness, that's actually good, because otherwise you're just going to be worried about something else, right? Any of you worry about like things that they're really worryable? I think that's just the nature we worry, right? Isn't it? I'll go to the airport, like way early, and I'll be thinking, I hope I don't miss the plane. It's like I'm there early. Like it's just worry anyway. Who knows what'll happen? Flight will leave early, or they'll change the terminal. So there's just like the nature of the mind is always worry. What if this happens? What if that happens? So Prabhupada's, he's basically saying you can use that propensity to worry about service. That's transcendental and that's blissful. Yeah. Otherwise, I don't know. I was temple president of 4 temples, and I managed different Sankirtan parties. And sometimes it was a lot of work, complicated, and quite busy, all day. And sometimes it was a lot of anxiety. Yes. Sometimes even I was younger. Sometimes it was like the point where if there was any more anxiety, they would have had to carry me out in an ambulance to the mental hospital. It was like pretty intense sometimes. And then I tried to live as a Brahmin after I was married, and I was able to do that for about 7 years or so. But then after that, I had to figure out how to make money, so we did some business. And then we got a house and a car and had a child. And so there's anxiety in maintaining, and how, every grihasta, has anxiety to maintain. Two people are working, but then, you have a baby, now only one's working, less income, the rent goes up and inflation, and your car breaks down, and big repairs. So there's always anxiety. Even if you look in Prabhupada's life, he was starting this business, starting that business, trying to support his family, Bhaktivinoda Thakur. It's the nature of Grihastha life. It's just, unless your parents are very wealthy and they have a fund for you, it's the nature that, you have to work. And if you don't own your house, at any point, the landlord can say, okay, you have to move, we're selling it. And at any point, your boss can fire you. And so I was going through that kind of thing. And that's a point I was thinking, I don't mind anxiety, but this anxiety for myself is really depressing. Because I was reflecting on the anxiety that I was experiencing as a temple president and the anxiety that I was experiencing as a grihasta. And in some ways, it was very similar. The temples never have enough money, at least at that time they didn't. Was the president, you're always worried, how are we going to get enough money to pay the bills, feed the devotees, right? So now I'm worrying about the same thing, but it's not the temple, it's my house, my family. So I could experience a distinct difference between anxiety for Krishna and anxiety for myself. And I used to think like, I don't mind anxiety, but anxiety over my own life, it's pretty dry. But anxiety for Krishna is blissful. So even though it's anxiety, it's for Krishna. And so because Krishna consciousness is blissful, any way you look at it, it's blissful even when it's not blissful. That's the understanding. It's always blissful, even when it's not, because it's for Krishna. Okay, next. There's a lecture, Radhastami. As Radharani is always in feelings of separation of Krishna, similarly, in the position of Radharani, Lord Chaitanya was feeling separation of Krishna. That is the teaching of Lord Chaitanya, feeling of separation, not meeting. Yeah. Just as we said, because the feeling, it's a greater love. So whatever situation or feeling creates greater love, that's what the devotee wants, right? So that's why we can relish separation, because it creates greater love. Hare Krishna. I don't know if you know this, but Prabhupada's servants and secretaries, after a while, they wanted to leave and do other things. Did you know that? Because you might think, wow, if I was Prabhupada's servant or secretary, that would be like amazing. But interestingly enough, some of them just after a while wanted to do something else. It's like they wanted separation. They needed separation. They felt that they would do better in separation. It's interesting, isn't it? Because they were taking Prabhupada for granted in some way. Or they were thinking, I could do better service than just, giving you massage and cooking. Anybody can do that. So even though they were together, they were feeling, let me serve you in separation. That will be higher. And many devotees have said this, that sometimes the closest they ever felt to Prabhupada was not when they were sitting with him, but when they were taking risks and undergoing inconveniences in his service. That's when they felt the closest. Isn't that beautiful? So I was listening something very interesting. If you ever want to do a little study of how other Eastern religious groups are spreading their teachings, there's the Paramahansa Yogananda has an organization called the Self-Realization Fellowship. And so they teach Bhagavad Gita, they teach yoga, they teach the basics of Gita. And they call it Kriya Yoga, Karma Yoga. And they give their lectures in what looks like churches, and people sit in chairs and they're up on the pulpit. And they wear a priest suit, but it's just orange. It's saffron because they're renunciates. But it's very interesting to watch. But what's most interesting is to listen to their lectures, because some of the lectures, if you didn't know, you would think it was a devotee giving a talk. You probably think it was like Krishna West. Maybe this is a Krishna West program. It's very, down to earth and relatable. And the audience is, just normal people who have adopted some of the practices of what Yogananda taught. But that's not the point. The point is, I find it fascinating to listen to their lectures because they're so similar. They're so similar to what we're teaching. You could even learn because they're topical lectures. But the thing that stood out to me, I was happy I listened to this lecture. The thing that stood out to me is this one lady was giving a lecture and she was continually quoting Yogananda and calling him Gurudev and saying, well, Gurudev said this, and Gurudev showed us this, and Gurudev told us how to do this, and Gurudev told us that. And I don't know when Paramahansa Yogananda left this world. Does anybody know? Was it the 1950s? When was it? Chaitanya Dasi knows everything. She's Google incarnate. What year? Or she's going to find out. He came to America, I think, in the 20s. I will say he left in 1951 or 2 or something. Paramahansa Yogananda. He was a yogi. His body didn't, what's the word? What does your body do? His body didn't disintegrate for like 20 days. Anyway, she's trying to find it, but, oh, it's down there somewhere. I don't see it. I didn't get the message in the chat. You can just say it. What year?
Hare Krishna. It's in 1952.
Ah, I know everything, don't I? Hare Krishna. Who said I can't be guru? I even know when Yogananda died. I must know everything, right? It's not the qualification of a guru to know when Yogananda died. But anyway. So I don't know when this lecture was. Let's assume if this lecture was up on the internet, it couldn't have, if it's there on the internet now, I'm sure it was the latest, the 90s, and it could even be now. But even if it's the 90s, that's 40 years after now. It's like 70 years. So the thing that struck me was all throughout the lecture, she was quoting Yogananda. So Gurudev said this, Gurudev told me that, Gurudev guided us this way. And it was almost like if you didn't know who Gurudev was, you would think it's somebody that's like lives with her or something. Like he was so enthralled in her life, enthralled and enmeshed. It was like such influence on her life. It was like he was so much a part of her life. There was, when you hear her talk, it was like there's no question that she separated from him. Everything she was teaching was things that he taught her. Not whether you like what he taught or not is another thing. That's not the point. But the point was, you could feel when she was talking that he was everything to her. Her whole life evolved around his teachings, and it didn't matter that he was gone. He was as present as ever. And one could argue, or one could guess, that for her, perhaps he was even closer to her now than when he was alive. Possible, right? So that's what we learn that separation does, that it actually keeps you closer to that person. Hare Krishna. So if you're feeling, I mean, devotees don't like to hear this because they don't know how to process this exactly. Or maybe they don't experience this exactly, but we could say separation done right brings you closer. If it's done right, you'll be closer. And that's why some of the devotees who were serving Prabhupada wanted to be separated. They wanted to go out and travel and preach so they could be closer to Prabhupada. Isn't that interesting? They wanted to serve the mission so they could feel closer. Right? Hare Krishna. So we'll read the next one. Or is this, or do we already read? Let me read this. Is that the next one? Festival lecture? We read that, right? These are, of course, very transcendental great science. One who's advanced in Krishna consciousness and well conversant with the Shastras, they can understand, but still we can discuss from the Shastra. When Krishna wanted to understand himself, he took the tendency of Srimati Radharani, and that is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Radha Bhava Dhuti Savalitam. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna, but he has accepted the propensities of Radharani. As Radharani is always in feelings of separation of Krishna, similarly in the position of Radharani, Lord Chaitanya was feeling separation of Krishna. That is a teaching of Lord Chaitanya, feelings of separation, not meeting. The process of devotional service taught by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his disciplic succession is how to feel separation from Krishna. That is Radharani's position, always feeling the separation. So here you go again. Mahaprabhu was teaching separation and teaching by his example, feeling it. And he came to feel it. He wanted to experience it as a devotee. So really, this is what we're trying to feel. Now we have a question from P. I was just wondering, there are people who don't know Krishna, but they are still mindful, happy, and content. They're obviously not in the majority, but they still exist. How come that they have developed those good qualities? Is this from previous life? I apologize. There are different reasons. The Prabhupada used to say, karmically, you are given a certain amount of happiness and a certain amount of distress. So Prabhupada said that happiness and stress will come according to past karma. According to psychologists, your personality, your DNA, or something, I forget what, determines about 50% of your happiness, or some figure like that. Do any of you know what they say? Like 50% of your happiness is genetic and 50% is what you do, or 90% is genetic and you only have 10%. I don't know exactly what they say, but we could say that's a karmic thing, that some people are just miserable no matter what. It doesn't matter what happens in their life, nothing will make them happy. It's just karmically there. Like whatever it is, it's not enough. So, and according to the Gita, if you live in the mode of goodness, you'll be happy, but that's material happiness. So when you say people are happy, that's materially happy. So that's okay. But spiritual happiness, ananda, that is not something that you can get karmically. That is something you have to do through purification. And there's a problem. This sounds weird, but material happiness is a problem. Why is it a problem? Because if I'm materially happy, then I may not be inclined to pursue spiritual life. I don't really need it, or I don't need much of it because I'm okay already. But Prabhupada said that's the danger of material happiness. It's contentment, which would then perhaps neutralize to one degree or another the intensity with which you're either interested or practice spiritual life. In any case, Prabhupada said it's the idea that, I'm happy, I like this world, I like my life, okay. But that means you'll come back and take another life. The last point that I think is the most important is that Prabhupada would many, many times tried to explain to us that we don't really know the depth and beauty of spiritual bliss, spiritual happiness. And then if we actually could experience it, then we would understand that what we call material happiness is not happiness at all, because it's within a context of birth, old age, disease, and death. So it's like saying, I've got a nice jail cell, it's really nice, and we have a swimming pool and a prison, so things are good. And if someone said that, people outside the prison would think, that's really weird what you're saying. Like, you like it in prison because they have a nice swimming pool and a nice gym, and I'm getting to study engineering. Yeah, it's great. I like it. People outside would think, I would never want to be in the gym. So it's something like that, because we have such little experience and understanding of the spiritual dimension, then that material happiness for us relative to material misery, that material happiness is good. And then we become conditioned to that happiness, and then we stay here in the material world. And that staying here could go on perpetually while Krishna is waiting, the spiritual world is waiting for us, which is infinitely greater in every way. And that's the only thing that can satisfy us. So that's the danger of being happy. We also really need to look at time from an eternal perspective. Because when you look at time from a temporary perspective, it's like, you go on a great vacation for 2 weeks. It's like, makes your whole year practically. That was fantastic. But however fantastic that is, it doesn't last very long. So here's a watch, P. It's a great watch. It'll last 2 weeks. And here's a watch. It's a great watch. It'll last forever. Which watch do you want? Of course, you want the watch that lasts forever. So that's how Prabhupada explained it. You want a relationship, okay, even if it's good, that won't last, or you want one that'll last. You always, if the price is the same, you'll buy the product generally with a longer warranty, right? The one that's made better, that, all the reviews, this thing, you can't break it even if you try. And the other one, I pulled it out of the box and it broke. As soon as I put it on, it broke. So which one do you want? So I think that a part of the problem for us, or for anybody, maybe not as much for us, but to some degree for us, but for people who are not on the spiritual path, everything is relative. So they're not looking at life on an eternal timeline. And the happiness they're looking at is a very small fragment of eternal time. Oh, so I could be happy for 100 years. Wow, fantastic. That's nothing in eternal time. And then again, that happiness is also nothing compared to Ananda. So it doesn't, I've often said, material happiness doesn't rate on the Ananda meter. If the amount of Ananda goes from 0 to 10, and you put it to material happiness, it won't even get to 0. It doesn't rate. It's completely different. But if we're not experiencing that, then we won't be able to understand this. But when you experience Ananda on a daily basis, then you might see somebody who has great material happiness, and you look at it and you just go, big deal. He's got a yacht, great, like, well, he goes out on Sunday and gets drunk with his friends, and that's happiness. We'll look at that and think this is ridiculous. And how hard did that guy work to get that yacht? For 40 years, he broke his back. So we'll look at that and say, that's happiness? And who knows how he got his money, how many people he lied to and cheated and deceived. That's also possible. So as devotees, if you want to remain steady in Krishna consciousness, you have to be able to see things from this perspective. Otherwise, things of this world will look really good. And you might even think devotees are not really happy, and the non-devotees are happier. Yeah, they're happier because they're drinking on the weekend. That's why they're happier. And they don't have to follow any principles. So externally, they don't have that anxiety, but they have all kinds of other anxieties. So, they're doing whatever they want. Yeah, but when they get older, especially like around their 50s and older, they'll look back at that and go, that didn't do me anything. Just burnt me out. All those parties, all those girlfriends, just look at them. They look like they're 80 years old and they're 50. They live a life like that, isn't it? So we have to remain stable in Krishna consciousness. It's very easy if you see from this perspective. Otherwise, you'll see these people who are rich and famous, and you'll think, oh, they're living the life. I can guarantee you they're not living internally any better life than anybody else, maybe worse. Because the external doesn't heal. The nice external stuff doesn't heal the internal. It can't. You have to heal that. And it can't bring you to a state of bliss unless, if you don't do austerity, you don't get purified. So you're rich and famous, you don't even have to lift a finger. You have, maids and servants and the nicest vehicles. You can fly first class. It's like, no, austerity in your life is quite reduced. But for us as devotees, we know we need austerity because austerity is what purifies us. And when you get purified, then you experience spiritual bliss. So you have to look at the equation. Austerity equals purification equals spiritual bliss. Therefore, austerity equals spiritual bliss. That's how you get it. But materially speaking, austerity does not bring happiness. It brings suffering. It's just suffering, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't do austerity, you won't be happy. And that's I know that's in some sense, materially speaking, paradoxical. Like you have to, tapasya means to suffer. You have to suffer physically to be happy. That sounds strange, doesn't it? But what it means is you reduce your material desires and material needs, and that allows you to focus on your spiritual desires and needs, and that's what will make you happy. So the austerity, the sacrifice, the giving up is actually the way you get. And the getting, you don't really get anything. You get some flash, a little high. What do they call it? A rush. You get a rush. True happiness is you get a rush. And then everything comes back to where you were before. Come back to your old miserable self. If that's who you are, you can't escape it. You know, alcohol's temporary, drugs are temporary, you know, having a party's temporary. So here we go from Chaitanya Dasi. None other than the incarnation of Google. The twin study of over 2,000 twins from the Minnesota Twin Registry found that approximately 50% of life satisfaction is due to genetics. See, I told you I know everything. This leaves 40% attributable to intentional activities and 10% attributable to external events. So that's interesting that the 10% is only due to external. The 40 is what you can do, and the 50 is your predisposition. For the sake of discussion, we can go with that, whether we agree with that. We tend to transcend that. So maybe you're miserable by material nature, but you can be transcendently blissful in Krishna consciousness. It's just when you come out of Krishna consciousness, you'll just be miserable. Ever seen a devotee like that? Super blissful. But when they're not blissful, they're like angry and frustrated, and you know. But when they're blissful, they're very blissful. So you know, we tend to be able to transcend these things. Yeah. But I like that. I like that as a, you know, sometimes there would be some research or something written in a book that seemed to be authoritative in the sense that people accepted the authority of the book or the author of the study. So Prabhupada wouldn't investigate it, but he would just quote it, thinking that, well, this is an authority people accept, and what this person is quoting is something we could use to explain our philosophy. So he would explain it. So this would be an example that you say, according to a study, 50% is genetic, 40% is what you work on, and 10% is external events. And so then you could say, only 10% of your happiness is going to come from what you create around you. That's pretty interesting. It's pretty negligible. Now, I mostly say most of it comes from you, your own actions. But from the spiritual perspective, we would say it's already there. So it comes from spiritual activity, then you just uncover it. You connect with it or you uncover it. You don't create it. Like some people say, this is how to be happy, as if you create happiness by your action. So that's okay. That they're talking about sattva guna. If you create happiness by your action, it means you're acting in sattva guna. You're helping people, you're compassionate, you're kind, selfless service. That will make you happy because it's all sattva guna. But from the spiritual point of view, you don't create happiness. You already are happiness. You just uncover it. See the difference? Like I can say, Samira, if you serve people, you'll be happy. And we all have experienced that. If we serve, we'll be happy, right? So that's something you do that will make you happy. But from the spiritual perspective, is you already are happiness. So it's not something you do to be happy. Happiness already is there. It's something you do to purify yourself, to experience it. And most people don't talk about that. They talk about this is what you can do to be happy, either materially or in terms of growth or in terms of sattvic activity. Buddhist is very sattvic, you know, be compassionate, forgiving, mindful, and so forth. Yeah, you'll be happy if you do that, but that's not spiritual bliss. It's, mostly it's sattva guna. Okay. In recent years, I have received many people in psychotherapy who are materially stable and happy, have achieved family and material well-being, but feel an important internal emptiness and eventually get depressed and wonder if there isn't more to life apart from this. But they are not all, just some people. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good. They're inquisitive, they're introspective, and those people would be open to practice spiritual life. There is, Prabhupada said, there are two kinds of happy people in the world, the Paramhamsa and the drunk, or the person in the mode of ignorance. Ignorance is bliss. So the person who transcends material miseries is happy, and the person who descends them by so much ignorance that they don't even feel anything. So there's so much ignorance, like, it's kind of like if you walk into a home of a college student, he doesn't have a carpet. The floor is carpeted with his clothes, and it doesn't bother him. And the bathroom hasn't been cleaned like in 3 months, and the dirt's piling up, layer by layer. You ever seen a student apartment or a dorm? Well, maybe not the women. I don't know, but for the guys, that's kind of like off. Not all guys, but some. Maybe some women also. I don't know. But we'll use this as an example of somebody. There is somebody out there whose apartment is a mess. We know that. And it doesn't bother them. And you walk into that apartment, you're like, I can't stay here. This is too disorganized. So that means you might say, well, this person in the apartment, he's unaffected. He's Paramhamsa. He's transcendental. He's got unlimited tolerance. No, he's got unlimited ignorance. So two people are happy, the Paramhamsa and the person in the mode of ignorance. One has transcended the miseries and one has numbed himself to the miseries. So, so you have these people, I'm happy in the world, and okay, I don't deny it. But we, as devotees, we don't define that as happiness. Like, you're happy and you're getting old and you're going to die. That doesn't make sense. Like, why would you be happy about that? Now, the reason we say that is because we know there's existence beyond this world, so we can say that. But if you don't know, then you don't know. And so you're just left with whatever, right? I mean, I was just in Hawaii, it's like, go to Hawaii, you'll be happy. All you miserable people, get the next flight to Hawaii and move there. But of course, when you move there, you have anxiety because everything is very expensive. And it's very hard to maintain there unless you're working 2 jobs or you have a really good job. But there is happiness there. It's like sattvic happiness, nature. The P has a question. That's a valid, wise point. Material happiness keeps us trapped. Thank you so much. This makes me wonder if my job as a coach might be counterproductive in some ways. I mean, I'm working with helping people to grow, but working with non-devotees, it's difficult for me to bring them back to Krishna. How do I solve this if a higher degree of happiness actually just makes the trap in the material world? Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, and I think the honest thing for us to say as coaches is to say, I can help you achieve all your goals, but this isn't going to make you happy. So if you want, I can do that, but I want to tell you offhand, there's something much deeper that's going to make you happy, and this isn't it. But if you need to get this out of your blood, or you just need to do this just because you have to do it, that's fine, and I'll help you. But I just want you to know, you're not a material being, you're also a spiritual being. So all of this ultimately It's not going to really make you any better off than you are now. But if you have to do it, I will show you how. But I also want to show you, once you get that, what's next. You know, like once you get that and everything's settled, I want you to ask me the question, now what? What's next? Because that's what next is the real thing. Something like that. That's the way I feel that as devotee coaches, we need to approach it. Of course, if someone is in difficulty or suffering or just divorced or whatever, they're much more open now to spiritual life, much more open to understanding there must be something better. So, you know, you can teach them and say, you know, no matter what you get, you're going to feel an emptiness. No matter what I help you to get, you will feel an emptiness because you're not a material being. Right. So I think that much we should say. I just want to warn you. This is you'll get all this and you'll be okay and you'll say I'm happy, but you'll feel empty. And so when you come to that point, you ask me what's next, and we'll go from there. So you kind of, you know, drop that appetizer. Sydney says, I believe it's needed to get them closer to saying that they need spiritual happiness, maybe spiritual life coaching. Yeah, that's the idea, you know. I'll help you get what you want, but you're still going to be empty. That's just nothing I can do about it other than help you achieve something that will fill that emptiness. But if you're going for these other things, that's the nature of these things. Anuradha says, once an important lawyer contacted me asking for help because even though he has everything, material success, he was not able to sleep or eat or have a little peace. Yeah, yeah. So as devotees, we should understand these things. But non-devotees don't yet understand it. And it's very difficult to understand if you don't have experience. So really our job is to give people experience. And also, if the more Krishna conscious you become, the more people will feel it. And they'll say, yeah, you seem like you have something that nobody else has. And you can say, yeah, I do. You know, I look at my life and I think, you know, I choose my goals based on what I believe is most important. So from the material point of view, someone may say, well, you don't look that successful materially. Don't live in a 10,000 square foot mansion. You don't drive a Mercedes Benz. You don't have a New York Times bestseller and so forth. And I would say you're right. And I've never tried for those things because I didn't value them. I don't consider that success. So I've never tried for that. Not that we couldn't try for it and use it for Krishna service, but you will try for what you believe is important. And so as devotees, we never want to fall into this illusion that achieving some level of material success is important. It's important to some degree. You have to maintain yourself. But as a goal, end goal in and of itself, it's just going to take you away from Krishna consciousness. So that's our message. We're trying to help people understand that. Right? Hare Krishna. Yeah. Give that lawyer prasadam. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Catch me while I'm still awake. This time of day after I give class, I always feel tired. I have to open the windows. Hold a sec. Hold on. There's not enough air coming in. How to preach to the ones who are so busy making material wealth, they say they don't have time for themselves and God. Well, one thought is there's plenty of people who do have time to pursue God consciousness. So if you spend time trying to convince those who don't have time to have time, you lose time that you could be giving to people who are interested. So I'm not big on trying to convince people who don't want to be convinced. But you can just ask them the same question. So when you get all this money, then what? And when your time's over, you've spent your whole life just trying to achieve material success, then what happens? Do you know? Don't you think you should know? Don't you think that's important? You know, those, will you appeal to that? You know thyself. It's the we have a question from Scarlett on Facebook. Can someone check that out? You know, Prabhupada used to say, it's not like we're against people doing anything. It's just if they do it at the expense of their spiritual life, it's just a wasted life. So, Krishna conscious philosophy, I think every religious philosophy is, what is the use if you gain the world and lose your soul? So, what is going to save you at the time of death? Not your money, not your family, not your career, not your Nobel Peace Prize, not your bestseller. None of that will save you. So Prabhupada always appealed to that. Like, what will save you? She got the answer and I didn't even see the question. Is that it? Yeah. So Prabhupada's message was, put things in perspective. Material is important to some degree, but only to some degree. Spiritual is more important. So in Kali Yuga, the spiritual gets minimized, the material gets maximized. In former ages, as you go back in each age, the spiritual is maximized, the material is minimized. So the further you go back all the way to Sat Yuga, it's only spiritual, there's very little material. So as that equation shifts as the ages progress. So in Kali Yuga, it's mostly material. And as you see, the world's becoming more atheistic, maybe more now than ever before. And so that's part of the trend. And atheism means don't waste your life working for another life that you're not even certain exists. Just make the best use of this life, and then you die, and that's it. You're gone forever. Nice knowing you. That's it. Is that satisfying philosophy? I don't think so. I exist for 50, 60. Some people only exist for a few years, or a maximum 100 or so. Have some good times, some bad times, then I die. And that's the purpose of life. Well, if that's the purpose of life, whoever created the universe made a big mistake. Because that does not really that's not fun. Why even, if that's the purpose of life, why even exist in the first place? So you can, go to school and you get bullied, for 10 years and then work your rear end off to get good grades so you can work in a corporate company for 40 years, You think about it, I think for a lot of people, probably they'd be happier if they never were alive in the first place, because their life wasn't that good. And then the end, it's all downhill. Your body slows down, start losing your mind. This disease, that disease, the machine breaks down. Like what kind of deal is that? So, people will say, well, you devotees, you're all pessimistic. Look at how you look at the world, so negative. Yeah. And I think for us, all of us, we should remember when people accuse us of being pessimistic, say, no, I'm being realistic. You're being optimistically naive. Now, I understand, we should be positive and all that. But, like in the Gita, Krishna doesn't pretend there's no old age and death. He doesn't pretend that this body is everything. He tells it like it is so that we can deal with it. But if you don't tell it like it is, you can't deal with it. And that's violence. That's why Prabhupada said modern education is a slaughterhouse, because they don't tell it like it is. You're not educated you're not educated spiritually. You're educated to get ahead materially. I mean, look at it. It's not a lot of fun. And you will find out it's not a lot of fun to get old. It's just more difficult. It's like an old car. Why do people trade their car in every few years? Because so it won't break down. As you get older, the body starts breaking down. It's not fun. If you're over 30, you've already seen it. In every decade, you'll see it break down more. That's my experience. It breaks a little, like every 10 years, it goes, unless you really, really take care of yourself and really, really. You got to really, really work on it. Yeah. I met a woman at work. She shared that she doesn't like her surname and that she hoped to marry to give it up. And when I told her that she will one day give it up anyway, indicating that once she dies, she won't have to carry that name anymore. She thought I am talking about her getting married soon. Like the die seemed not to be present at all. You were telling her, well, you won't have that name forever anyway. That's a real German way of preaching, huh? Give them the sauce. Yeah, give them the sauerkraut. Yeah. Hey, Samir, I found out that sauerkraut is one of the healthiest foods out there. It's rich in so many. Did you know that? That's why the Germans are strong. They eat a lot of sauerkraut. Yeah. Well, there is a verse or a series of verses in Bhagavatam in which it explains that Lord Brahma created this delusion that, even though death is around the corner, no one will think it's around the corner, because if you think death's around the corner, unless you're on a spiritual platform, you're going to be kind of crazy. Like, are you going to school? No. Why not? Because I could die. Are you going to get married? No. Why not? Because I could die. You're going to have kids? No. Why not? Because I could die. You're going to eat today? No. Why not? Because I could die. You can't. But so that's not the way it's meant to work. So naturally, people just, you can't function thinking about death unless you're a devotee, right? So it's just spontaneously, you just like keep it out, because there's no place for it in your life. Like, what? I don't want to die, but what's the point? And we have one quote here from the Gita. Nonviolence is generally taken to mean not killing or destroying the body, but actually nonviolence means not to put others in stress. People in general are trapped by ignorance in the material concept of life, and they perpetually suffer material pains. So unless one elevates people to spiritual knowledge, one is practicing violence. One should try his best to distribute real knowledge to the people so that they may become enlightened and leave this material entanglement. That is nonviolence. Yeah. And that confirms the slaughterhouse statement. Modern education is a slaughterhouse, because unless it's elevating you spiritually, then it's killing you spiritually. So yes, Hare Krishna. Okay. We have officially ended class now on that happy note that we're all going to die. Just reminding you in case you forgot. I guess, yeah, you know, I had a little health challenge a few weeks ago. I didn't tell anybody, but I'm thinking about telling you because it wasn't serious, but it could have been. It just, I don't know. Maybe I'll tell you. Maybe I'll send out a message just so you know that I can also die, in case you didn't know, and sooner than you think. And it's just the way it is. It's the way life is. And when you get to a certain age, you know, heart attack, stroke, this, that, cancer, you know, it's like, it's kind of normal, right? So, yeah. Hare Krishna.